Attractions of Cape Breton for Tourists. This recording features an excerpt from Cape Breton Illustrated, Historic, Picturesque, and Descriptive by John M. Gow, published in 1893 and now in the public domain. The section presented here, Attractions of Cape Breton for Tourists, is only part of the complete work. The eastern part of Cape Breton lies nearer to Europe than any other part of the continent south of the St. Lawrence. If this island, in our age of rapid transit and modern development, possesses any of its ancient importance and advantage, it must consist in this fact. The Canadian Pacific Railway is the shortest of the three great transcontinental lines, the distance from Montreal to Vancouver being 600 miles less than that from New York to San Francisco. Montreal lies almost directly west of Sydney or Louisbourg, so that a direct line of railway, almost on the same parallel of latitude, could be built from the east coast of Cape Breton to that city. Sydney or Louisbourg is closer to Europe by 500 or 600 miles than is Boston or New York, and, reckoning the distance from Halifax to Truro by rail, almost 300 miles nearer than Halifax. An express train runs at double the speed of the fastest ocean steamship. The sooner, therefore, the traveler can get on shore, the better. So without question, the route from Europe to the Pacific coast via Cape Breton and Montreal is the shortest of any south of the St. Lawrence. The shortest sea voyage from Britain to America is certainly through the east point of Labrador. But this coast is accessible only 4 months of the year, and sometimes not that. The length of the voyage, too, would be uncertain and the danger great. The harbor of Sydney, the ancient resort of Spanish fishermen, though one of the finest sheets of water and one of the most splendid anchorages in the world, is closed to navigation, generally speaking, for 4 or 5 months in the year. The drift ice in the spring is the most serious impediment, sometimes extending 40 or 50 miles off the shore. Occasionally, the entire passage between Cape Ray and the island of Cape Breton is obstructed. During the early winter months, the local ice would present less difficulty. The harbor of North Sydney, at all events, could be kept open for the purposes of an important commerce, but the harbor of Louisbourg is the only one in Cape Breton which is perfectly safe, easy of access, and practically free from ice. It is almost entirely landlocked, easier of access from the east than any other harbor on the Atlantic coast, and with the exception of an occasional blockade of drift ice in the spring, practically free from obstruction. A steamship making for Halifax or Boston is nearly as much under the necessity of avoiding drift ice in the spring as if she were bound for Louisbourg. By keeping to the south on meeting with any such obstruction, and then steering directly for Louisbourg, there would rarely, if ever, be any difficulty in effecting an entrance, as the ice very seldom is found on the south shore of Cape Breton in masses sufficiently formidable to arrest the movements of a powerful steamer. The distance from Liverpool to Japan and China is shortened by the Canadian line as it now exists by 1,000 miles and would be still further shortened by the proposed route via Cape Breton. So in forming a link in the chain of rapid transit around the world, and consequently in facilitating the passage from Britain to her East Indian dominions, this route possesses manifest advantages over any other during all seasons of the year. The claims of Louisbourg to be selected as a winter port have been often enough before the public, and have been embodied in what has been said before. But for purposes of rapid communication, Louisbourg, as we have said, possesses manifest advantages in summer as well as in winter, occupying as it does a point in a more direct line from Britain to Montreal than that traversed by any other route. The maritime provinces, in consequence of geographical facts, were left out in the cold at the time of Confederation. The commerce of the Dominion, of the northern parts of the continent, sweeps past us to the north and south. That we should have an outlet of trade over our territory competent to compete with the magnificent waterway of the St. Lawrence in summer is, of course, not in the nature of things. To the west of us, and communicating with the American shore at easy distances, is a system of railway and river and canal that put the long roundabout route of the intercolonial out of the question for any quantity of heavy articles of exportation. The intercolonial was to have made Halifax the wharf of the Dominion. It is as far from that enviable distinction as ever, and never can be the wharf of the Dominion. It is not natural that it should be so. Halifax has not fared well under Confederation. The Canadian drummer has inundated the maritime provinces and brought dull times upon Halifax, where there is not much manufacturing done. A protective policy does not do the Halifax people much good. We are not going to say whose fault it is, but these are the facts. The upper provinces had the start of us in manufactures. We are just learning to creep in this department in the maritime provinces. But we are not at all in despair. Some of our little towns are doing very well and would make a good showing in comparison with towns of like size in any part of the world. The intercolonial road, at the same time, was not without its uses. It served a good purpose in a military sense. It unified the provinces and first opened communication by rail between them. But it has not done what was promised for it, and it never can. It is not probable that the bulk of import or export from Canada will ever move through the maritime provinces. Commerce will follow its natural channels. But for purposes of rapid transportation, it does not appear that there is any railway terminus so eligible on the east coast of North America as Cape Breton. It is rumored that the Canadian Pacific Railway Syndicate are considering the advisability of acquiring the management of the railway between Truro and Sydney. This movement, we believe, would be the making of Cape Breton and would realize the dreams of many of her people. There is no doubt that passengers and the lighter articles of a multifarious commerce could be moved by this route faster than by any other. In fact, one cannot conceive the Canadian Pacific Railway doing a wiser or more consistent thing. It naturally would seem to be a necessary part, of their gigantic and comprehensive policy. They might just as well have fast steamers from Cape Breton as from Vancouver, and thus complete a magnificent system of communication from Britain to Japan and China. Steamships now exist that could make the run from Liverpool to Cape Breton in about 4 days, and no doubt the time will yet be reduced to 3 days. It is difficult to see how these statements can be invalidated or what is to prevent their accomplishment. So much for the importance and advantage of Cape Breton as a terminus in the line of rapid communication round the world, as a point in the shortest route from Britain westward to the East Indies, the shortest and most convenient route practicable all the year round. Thus far, these remarks have been purely theoretical and without reference to localisms or local interest. But viewed from a Cape Breton standpoint, the claims of this island might be put in a more urgent and emphatic manner. Were the terminus of the CPR extended to Cape Breton, the steam tonnage which would naturally be attracted in this direction would afford an outlet for our coal. In these days of keen competition, it seems to be a problem where we are to find a profitable market for this, the most important product of the island. In many other minor ways, the location of an important railway terminus here would certainly conduce to the prosperity of this eastern outpost of the Dominion. In the presence of the requisite facilities, trade and travel spring up we know not how, and railways are often rendered profitable in districts where it had been difficult to see where the trade was to come from. For example, fresh fish might be sent from here into the heart of the Dominion, and thus an impetus be given to our local fisheries. And Cape Breton made an important center of the deep-sea fishery, as it has been already in its history. Our farmers are everywhere complaining that local markets are too small and unimportant for their products. And, as a consequence, that industry is languishing all over the island, dragging out a dying existence. To the monotony of farm life is added the crushing disadvantage that it does not pay. Some of the finest farming districts in the Dominion are in Cape Breton, but they are now doing very little. The young people will not farm. The conditions of a farmer's life in this country are too hard for them. They are going off literally in troops to the States. It is difficult to find a house in Cape Breton from which from 1 to half a dozen of its members are not in New England. Many of these are forced to go in order to live. They know not what else to do. And many of them are helping to support their relatives from there too, and are sending them home money. This is a hard case for the country, but it is true. It is no wonder that the island is becoming Americanized. It is natural that it should. Men do not generally quarrel with their bread and butter, if they can help it. Cape Breton men abound in the American fisheries. They could work as well and better from home if they had the proper incentives, and they would save more money and be far better men. Lunenburg is now the most prosperous fishing town in the world, yet 30 years ago the grass was threatening to invade its streets. All that our people need is just a commencement. They have enterprise and daring enough, as is very well known, and they only need to imbibe the idea that they can be profitably used at home. Our government has been flinging money broadcast, east and west, north and south, for the development of the country, yet certain portions of our country have been arrested in their development for want of means and appliances. It is surely not too much to expect that a right proportion of these resources, which have been spent directly or indirectly for the development of the country, should find their way in our direction, in order that the development of these districts, where they are capable of development, may be carried on from the point at which it has been arrested. If a government has anything to do with the growth of a country, if it has any function at all in that direction, it is surely its duty to prevent its people from becoming denationalized and expatriated. The delights and blandishments of American civilization have their attractions for our young people, sometimes to their own undoing. Young people do not like to farm when they can do anything which they think better. Now, if we had more of the means and appliances of modern civilization at home, occupations and employments of different sorts and kinds would be created, and our young folks could find work here. The people of Nova Scotia and Cape Breton have always been great wanderers, like the people of Old Scotia, and for the same reason. We have been out of the track of the world's commerce, and our people have increased faster than our industries. If the maritime provinces had retained their natural increase of population and been able to find employment for them, we should by this time have had some millions of a population. It is true that we have now in Cape Breton a railway through the center of the island, from the Strait of Canso to the harbor of Sydney. And this railway is a great convenience. You can now travel from Sydney to the Strait in 3 or 4 hours. Formerly, the journey in wintertime sometimes occupied as many days. The snowbanks used to be somewhat obtrusive and impeded the liberty of the subject. The locomotive now bowls merrily along where the disgusted horse used to be winking with his ears, the only visible part of his anatomy out of the snowdrifts. This taste of railway has only whetted the appetite of the people for more. They say now they need a railway along both the south and north shores, the former within reach of Arishat, and the settlements along the south shore as far as Louisbourg and Manitou, the latter to Port Hood, Mabou, Marguerite to Badek, and thence down the north shore to the neighborhood of Cape Smoke. It is said that the system of railways in Cape Breton would then be complete. There is quite a population along these districts, and no doubt the presence of a railway would stimulate intercourse and benefit all these settlements which are now comparatively isolated. The very fact that people are clamoring for railroads and feeling the want of them indicates that use would be made of them were they constructed. But, apart altogether from the consideration that Cape Breton is a desirable eastern terminus for the rapid transit trade of the continent, the island stands unrivaled in the eastern part of America as a summer resort. The scenery, the climate, the position, and the historic interest attaching to this part of the Dominion are unequaled. This is just beginning to be known, or, at all events, to be realized, and it cannot be said that the people have done a great deal to make it known. Strangers have come in some way or other to find it out for themselves, apparently. Tourists have been flocking in considerable numbers to the island during the present summer, many of whom were unable to remain for want of suitable accommodation. We have here no hotels such as people of that description require. The localities where our finest scenery, our most desirable summer resorts are found, are entirely destitute of any such modern conveniences. Every house is, of course, a private hotel, and the folks will take you in with primitive, matter-of-fact hospitality. But that does not do. As a country for tourists and health seekers, the island needs development as much as in other departments, and more so. We are positively unequipped and unfurnished. We haven't begun to keep house in that way yet. But the demand will create the supply, and no doubt before long we shall have first-class hotels in our best localities. And these places are not easy of access. The way to them must be a perfect puzzle and labyrinth to anyone who does not know the country. You can reach some of these places only by dint of hard work and determination. The whole country needs to be opened up and brought within the limits of rational and convenient travel. Everyone, of course, knows how to get to Halifax, or if he doesn't, he can easily find out. After you reach Halifax, you can get to Sydney or North Sydney in a day after a rather tedious journey and a good deal of unnecessary delay. So far, so good. But then what? Why, if you want to see the finest scenery in the island, and to spend the pleasantest and most invigorating holiday you have ever had in your life, you must get a team at North Sydney. The stronger it is, the better, and start for Ingonish or Cape North, a distance of 100 miles or so. What, you say? Drive 100 miles? Now, don't get angry and kick things about, even if you are a conservative. We told you the country wasn't developed, even if it is in Canada, and if you want to see things in Cape Breton, you have to work for it. And we take it for granted you are a hearty sort of fellow, and not given to minding trifles. Well, you drive to Little Brador, a distance of 4 miles, where you will see some of the most picturesque scenery of its kind you've ever beheld. Some of these landscapes cannot be excelled anywhere. Then you drive across the magnificent island of Boularderie, or Boularderie, to the Great Brador Ferry. Here the scenery begins to be grand and magnificent. A long battalion of majestic green hills stretches away on your right as far as you can see, rising almost precipitously out of the turbid blue waters, for the current here runs strong and sometimes plays strange antics with the unwary boat. Nothing can be grander than the sight of this endless solid wall of living green. Here and there the cliffs jut out from the mass of vegetation with which they are covered, suggestive of the strength of the everlasting hills, while their green heads, garlanded with delicate tracery of deepest emerald, are sharply defined against the sapphire sky. Or see these hills on a day of mist and wind and rain. The vapor hangs in a solid curtain halfway down the height, as if their tops held secret and awful converse with him who settled their deep foundations. This is a fitting home for the children of the gale. The hills of Loch Nagar are here reproduced, with their steep, frowning glories. Surely the shades of the dead, with whom the strong, dark, and spirit of Byron loved to converse, have followed their sons across the western wave, and are now keeping watch and ward among these eternal hills. Leaving Great Brador, you scramble along a wretched road by the waterside, the country not being developed, for 2 miles. Then you urge your refractory steeds up a diagonal ascent to a height of 600 or 700 feet, and pass over a tableland for about 4 miles, and then the weight of your wagon shoves the apparently unwilling horses down to St. Anne's, Englishtown. This was the ancient resort of the French fishermen, and no wonder. It is one of the most magnificent sheets of water in the world, but the entrance is not deep. Here you can cross by ferry if you like. But if your object is to see the country, and no doubt it is, you will drive all around the harbour of St. Anne's. You will stop your team every 100 yards or so to observe some kaleidoscopic change in the gorgeous panorama around you. If you do not happen to think of it, if you should be musing about your sins or something else, your horse will glance around with a look of reproach, as much as to say, "Don't you see that?" And then doubtless you will see it. Keeping round the head of St. Anne's Bay and down the west side, you come to the North River. Do not pass that, but drive up the river as far as you can go, which is about 5 or 6 miles, and you will be repaid. Here are landscapes which can scarcely be surpassed. If you have the eye and the hand and the touch of an artist, you will want to stay here a week and will cast a longing, lingering look behind when you leave. Here are intervals of intensest green, sentineled by fantastic conclaves of mighty hills, riven by tremendous gorges through which rush the tributary brooklets of the North River, which winds and gleams and glitters between its emerald banks to the distant sea. Do not forget to see the Lion's Head, a majestic eminence resembling a lion couchant, keeping watch, as it were, over this enchanted land. Leaving the North River, you can drive, if you like, through a back settlement called Tarbert. Here are some splendid, secluded woodland views, little green flats surrounded by ever-varying groups of mighty hills, beneath whose shelter there nestles some tiny homestead, accentuating by its littleness the grandeur of its environments. Coming out again to the sea, you presently arrive at Indian Brook. At the outlet of this brook there is a magnificent scene visible as you pass along the highway. The banks of this brook are, for the most part, precipitous heights. In some places, the titanic cliffs rise sheer overhead to a height of 200 feet. A couple of miles up this stream is a waterfall, buttressed by tremendous jagged rocks, between which the water rushes down into a natural basin. This is a grand and stately spectacle. There is nothing more sublime in the maritime provinces, but it is hard work getting here. You procure a guide, and you climb up and tumble down over wooded steep and fallen tree and jagged rock, until at last you find yourself, if your guide hasn't lost himself, 200 feet directly over the base of the cataract. Then you begin to climb, or slide, or tumble down, whichever you can do the best, holding on to trees and twigs, until at last you find yourself upon the stony bed of the shrunken brook, for it is summertime, and then you can see what a grand and majestic scene towers above and surrounds you. Leaving Indian Brook, you drive along what is known as the North Shore for a distance of 20 miles or so. This place is settled all along by farmers and fishermen. On your left, at some distance from the road in most places, runs a continuous ridge of hills from 800 to 1,000 feet high. These present a grand and imposing appearance. They form one of the ribs of the northeast part of Cape Breton and terminate in Cape Smoke, which tumbles suddenly down into the Atlantic from a height of 1,100 feet. What convulsions of nature there must have been about here in olden times! The material of which Cape Breton is made has certainly been heaved about in chaotic fashion. Just look at it on the map. It does not look quite so remarkable now, of course, as it did in the hands of the old geographers, but it is remarkable enough yet, and always will remain so. But a look at the map of Cape Breton gives one no idea of the manner in which nature has tortured her ingenuity in devising picturesque and grand surprises for her children. Why, in Little Brador, the water at one point, about a quarter of a mile from the shore, goes sheer down to a depth of 200 fathoms. What an awful hole! The imagination creeps to think what there might be down there. And then, not far off, there is a hill 500 or 600 feet high. So here is a difference of level of nearly 2,000 feet. It seems as if nature had here realized one of her wild, fantastic dreams, had turned it into substance for the wonderment of her worshippers, and smiles with her glorious sun upon the triumph, or anon spreads over all the witching mystery of the moonlit night, half concealing yet revealing infinitely more than she has done. But we are approaching Smokey, as it is now familiarly called. It sounds more dignified, à la française, Cap Enfumé. The road winds up the southern side of the promontory for a distance of a mile or more, before we reach the tableland at the top. This is 1,000 feet or more above the level of the sea, which lies directly at your feet. We crossed here for the first time on a silent, moonlit night, and we shall never forget the scene. The stars never seem so close to us as from the top of this height, owing no doubt to the absence of vapor, in this upper atmosphere. Our thoughts wander far back to the springtide of humanity, when eastern sages watched their flocks by night, and saw the silent stars of God go by, and pondered of him and his ways and his dealings with men. To the days when life was earnest and without hurry, because it was linked to God, when fate was real and passion dignified, when the soul of man did not fritter itself to nothingness in the petty vices of an empty civilization. Men love strength, and so the fathers of the nations are represented as men who loved and hated, who sinned and sorrowed, who struggled and trusted like giants, and came triumphantly through it all. Men like to regard them now as a great cloud of witnesses, viewing the same fight in which so many of them lost present life and name and fame, and won a lasting name before God and man. Far beneath and around lies the dreaming moonlit sea, stretching away to the limitless horizon, for sky and ocean are blending in a hazy silver sheen. The soft moonlit floods athwart some deep and shaggy gorge that yawns down and down and down, directly at your feet, where hundreds of feet below, and through its gigantic portals, you see some far new vista of gleaming sea. This cape is one of the eastern bulwarks of North America, and proudly he lords it over the Atlantic wave. The mighty deep, lashed into fury by the eastern tempest, thunders in vain against this eternal rampart. But now the restless giant lies sleeping under the misty veil of night, and the languid wavelets whisper caressingly to the black jagged rocks, which but yesterday they rushed on in endless phalanx to assail. Such is the way of the unstable sea. This proud ocean mountain has seen many sights from his lofty watchtower since he first descried the quaint little ships of the early discoverers timorously creeping along the far horizon. Many a time has he seen the hostile fleets of France and England sweeping north or south, eager-winged, charged with the thunder of battle. This promontory derives its name from the fact that in dull weather, and often in fine weather too, its summit is concealed by a cloud of vapor, like a pillar of cloud guarding this eastern outpost of Canada. Should you cross Smokey on one of his misty days, you will not have very much for your pains, except a climb and a thorough wetting. But what is the use of talking? Come and see these things for yourself, and then you will know. The eye and the soul alone can do justice to them. After crossing 2 or 3 miles of tableland, these Cape Breton mountain ridges are all flat on the top. You find that you have passed over the mighty shoulders of this giant promontory, and you begin to descend on the Ingonish side. And now take your hat off, or whatever headgear you have on. Take care you don't catch cold, for you are about to see the finest sight in the maritime provinces. Yes, we will repeat it and stick to it. And so will you, after you see it. From the northern shoulder of Smokey, about halfway down the descent, the settlement and harbor of Ingonish and the distant outline of the Cape North range of mountains burst upon the view. The prospect has hitherto been obstructed by trees. There are, in fact, 3 harbors at Ingonish, a north, a south, and an inner harbor. Directly at your feet lies the village, built for the most part upon a broad beach which forms a natural breakwater to the inner harbor. The north and south harbors are separated by a rugged ridge of land extending seaward, at the extremity of which is Ingonish Island. From this point you cannot see Smokey, of course. The cape is away on your right, hidden by the woods. But the scene to the front and left of you is one of surpassing grandeur. Away in the distance extends the long line of hills which suddenly fall into the ocean at Cape North. Thin layers of mist are reposing on the declivities of these hills, above which you see the long line of their summits. Nearer at hand is the opposite shore of the North Harbor, well cultivated and sprinkled with the white houses of the inhabitants. Still closer is the uneven barrier which separates the North and South harbors. The latter is directly below you, a sheet of water extending 2 or 3 miles in each direction. But the inner harbor is the most striking feature in the landscape. It is a landlocked basin hemmed in by rugged precipitous hills, heaving up their huge masses to a height of 12 or 1,300 feet. The entrance to this basin is very narrow and is guarded by a picturesque-looking lighthouse. It was recently defended by a breakwater, but old Ocean, in one of his tantrums, knocked this to pieces, and there is little of it remaining. The inner harbor is as quiet as a mill pond most of the time, though subject to sudden gusts of winds that rush furiously between the mountains. The hills recede from its northern shore for some distance, and the lower space of deepest green is dappled with isolated masses of plaster cliff and the neat little white cottages of the fishermen. The view seaward from this point is one of wonderful beauty on a calm summer evening. In the foreground is the molten glory of the sea, reflecting shaggy mountain and crimson sky and lighthouse, and strand and village and white cliff and cottage with a distinctness and reality that makes you doubt which is the substance and which the shadow. Away in the distance on your right is a huge side of the promontory, rising out of the translucent sea. On your left, the rugged yet soft beauty of cliff and cottage and verdant field and picturesque knoll. The sun is resting for a moment on the verge of yon shaggy height, so that ere he departs he may flood all with a parting glow of glory. Ere long the witching moonlight will steal wistfully and tremblingly upon the unconscious earth and hold them spellbound beneath the weird magic of her mystic veil. Now step into some tiny boat and move slowly up this inner harbor as far as you can go, perhaps about 2 miles between those dark and silent mountains. At the head of the waters, the sea creeps up into a narrow creek between the stupendous hills, as if he had come here to mood and grieve over his mad passions. We seem to hear at intervals the long, deep sigh of the night, and all is still again. Nature seems comforting her weary forces with the premonitions of eternal rest. Here is perfect and utter isolation. No one is here to see, and you can confess to the spirit of the night what perhaps she knows only too well already, and grieves to know it, and would fain send you home shriven and straitened for the battle of life. Before leaving Ingonish, you should visit the island. Here is a lighthouse 237 feet above the sea, near which are tremendous cliffs rising sheer out of the water. At the mouth of a rocky gorge in these cliffs towers an isolated pillar of rock to the height of nearly 100 feet. It is the most striking object on the coast of the provinces. Go and see it. If you are living hundreds of miles from Cape Breton, it will pay you to come and spend here, at Ingonish we mean, your summer holiday. There is positively no place like it for this purpose on the Atlantic coast. People go nowadays first to the sea and then to the mountains. Go to both together. Come to Ingonish. If you want to spend 11 weeks or 7 weeks or 3 weeks or 3 months or 2 months, as the Highlandmen say, come to Ingonish. You can walk and you can drive. There are splendid drives about. And you can climb and you can tumble and roll down some hundreds of feet if you like, and get up again all the better for it. You can sail and row and fish and bathe, and breathe the purest and most invigorating air in America, and see the finest ocean scenery on the continent. Yes, you can. There is not the slightest doubt about it. If you happen to be, no, it's most likely you are, a Benedict, bring your wife along with you, and get a tent and some things somewhere, and commence housekeeping anew. There is a tremendous mountain here called Frainie's Chimney. It is 1,300 or 1,400 feet high. Mrs. Frainie, we never knew the woman, was never debilitated by stove heat. Neither will your wife be if she gets up there. It would be a tip-top place to do your cooking. You would have a fine appetite for your meal by the time you got up there, and you would have it finely digested by the time you got down. It would take you the most of all of your time to get backwards and forwards to your meals, and to eat them, for you would develop a portentous appetite. And Frainie's chimney would doubtless be kept smoking a good part of the time, much to the wonderment of the natives of the country. The worst of these Cape Breton mountains is that there is no path to the top of them. They are not used to it, and you are apt to lose yourself going up and just as apt to lose yourself coming down. This is indeed quite a serious business. The mountainside is so steep and rugged and so matted with underbrush that you need to be constructed something like an ironclad in order to get through. Ingonish was quite a settlement in old French times. There was a chapel here, the bell of which was found on the beach some years ago, as we have seen. As 200 militiamen were said to be available, there must have been quite a population at that place. Fishing is still the principal occupation, but our shore fisheries are failing fast, and consequently the outlook is not very promising. The fishermen here are smart and determined-looking fellows, and it is a pity they are not doing so well as formerly. But you may ask, how am I to get to Ingonish? Must I drive 60 or 70 miles from Sydney to get there? Well, the steamer Harla calls there once a fortnight, we think it is, and there is a little packet that goes from Sydney once a week or so, and these are the only present means of getting there, except you drive. By and by we shall no doubt have a proper steamer service from Sydney to Ingonish and Cape North. Probably it would pay well in the summertime. As soon as tourists begin to find out what sort of place it is, doubtless suitable accommodation will be provided. Leaving the south settlement of Ingonish, you drive round the head of the south, and then of the North Harbour, until you come nearly opposite Ingonish Island, where you strike off to your left for Aspy Bay, 24 miles distant. You soon begin to ascend a high ridge of land, up and up and up almost as high as Smokey. Across this plateau you traverse a region of chaotic wildness, where the road is in places simply desperate. 12 miles ahead is Halfway House, built by the government for the accommodation of travelers. A mile or more from this point, upon the shore, is Neil's Harbour, a fishing settlement. Pushing onward 6 or 7 miles farther, you come out upon the southern settlements in the neighbourhood of Aspy Bay, which at its head is divided into 3 separate harbours, so called. You now see close at hand the long barrier of mountains which ends abruptly in Cape North and forms the northern backbone of Cape Breton. Cape North itself, from this point of view, though so wild and rugged, plunges not altogether ungracefully into the depths of the Atlantic. Its stern and majestic outline conforms somewhat to the line of beauty. 5 or 6 miles inland from the Cape can be distinguished the Sugar Loaf, the highest land in these parts. You can readily perceive its superior height, but it has not the grandeur of many of its majestic companions. It has a narrow, contracted look, and shoots up in a sharp, unsymmetrical pyramid-shaped peak into the sky. In fact, it has a mean, ugly sort of look, and breaks the majestic outline of the chain of hills of which it is a member. But it is the first thing that attracts your notice when you approach Aspy Bay, and while in this region, you seem to see it all the time. Driving around Aspy Bay, you pass some very beautiful landscapes. This is a variegated district, land and sea, fertile interval and wooded mountain, grove and meadow, field and stream, gigantic white plaster cliff, and thrifty farms studded with sleek and beautiful cattle, and abounding in the richest of milk and Celtic respectability and gravity and hospitality. How grave and hospitable these people are! Such rolls and cake and milk, and all as grave and stately as a Spanish feast of state. A Gaelic grace from 10 to 20 minutes before you begin. By this time you are famishingly hungry, and another 5 minutes long at the end. If you are tired climbing up and rolling downhill all day long and go to bed early, you will probably hear, before you go to sleep, a Gaelic psalm sung and the scriptures read, and prayer of primitive length offered. Probably the mother has a fine voice and leads with clearness and confidence the family choir. The father accompanies in somewhat tardier bass notes, while the little ones follow in what order and at what intervals they best may. We hardly know how to express it, but a soldier would say, they sing in echelon. But they are very worthy people, a little narrow-minded and penurious, perhaps, but where are the faultless? People are the outcome of their history and traditions and environments. We would all be about alike were we under like conditions. Passing down the north side of Aspy Bay, you at last near the Sugarloaf, which grows more and more imposing as you approach it. The road through or over this range of hills, which winds round the east flank of the Sugarloaf, is not half so high as that over Smokey. The hills are not so densely packed just here, and you can get between them. Of course, one has to do the Sugarloaf, and the Sugarloaf does you to some extent before you have done with it. No guide was available just at the time we wanted one, so we had to start without that advantage. The first part of the ascent is easy, up a steep grade of comparatively unencumbered ground, but all of a sudden you reach the base of the pyramid, and its sides shoot up over your head at an angle of 45 degrees or so, and the ground is obstructed with rocks and pitfalls and underbrush and unseen holes. Slowly and laboriously you force your zigzag way up, and as you look skyward, you see some defiant peak hundreds of feet above your head. This, you think, must be the top. You make for it in a feeble, straggling sort of way, toiling and perspiring, and not feeling too devotional, sometimes going upon your head, sometimes on your feet, at other times on all fours, and occasionally tumbling ignominiously on your back into some treacherous hole that you are quite sure viciously winks as you fall into it. Presently we were quite lost. The only thing to do was to make hopefully and laughingly for the highest point we could see. This we did, but we could not see very far, the bushes were so thick. After an hour or so of this species of diversion, we could see more land very much above us. We had reached a little plateau, the shape and extent of which we could pretty well divine, but the stunted wood was still so thick that we could see nothing. Moving presently to the northern edge of it, we could see the giant shoulders of Cape North away in the distance, the broad, flat summit, and both sides falling suddenly downwards. We thus got a splendid idea of the nature of these Cape Breton mountain ranges, and we could see at the same time that we were a good deal higher than Cape North. Well, this was all we could see as yet, so we floundered about, trying to get a satisfactory glimpse of something through the trees, and presently emerged upon the southern verge of the summit. And here we were repaid for our climb, thanks to a recent fire which had denuded this side of the mountain of its vegetation. Aspy Bay, with all its intricacies of sea and shore, suddenly lay at our feet. We were 1,300 feet above level green fields which were not more than half a mile from us. The shape of every corn patch and field was as distinctly marked as the checkers on a board. You could almost see down the people's chimneys. So steep is this side of the hill that one is almost afraid of tumbling down. Far away to the west, you see the interminable range of hills swelling grandly down towards you. The Sugarloaf's next neighbor is a splendid fellow, not so high as he is, but much larger and more stately and majestic. But to the north and east you can see nothing. The woods must be cleared away from the summit and the path made up the mountain. And then for the tourists. We lost ourselves coming down the mountain too, worse than in going up. We got bagged in a thicket so close that a fox with his nose sharpened could scarcely have got through it. Then we had to skirt the mountainside a long distance northward, and finally got down, hungry but satisfied. From the Sugarloaf you keep on northward 2 or 3 miles, leaving the promontory of Cape North on your right. You have left the Atlantic behind you, and presently there bursts into view, between 2 mountains, the waters of Bay St. Lawrence. We first saw it just after a storm, and a wild, dreary expanse water it was. The Gulf of St. Lawrence, except at midsummer, is an inhospitable sheet of water anyway, and after a northerly gale, when it is piling its masses of surf against Cape North and Cape St. Lawrence and the intervening rock-bound coast, It is suggestive of anything but comfort. It looks so merciless and cold, and it is cold and merciless too. Its pallid, wrinkled face looks up to the pitiless sky as if expecting no pity, and it gets none. And so its foam-crested waves roll and rush landward to wreak their vengeance upon the black, unrelenting rocks that fling them back, shattered and shelterless. The mountain scenery of Cape North District is the rival of Ingonish. For grandeur and sublimity, it is its superior. At Bay St. Lawrence, you will see some magnificent mountain scenes. Close to the shore is a lake surrounded by bold green banks, and in the background rises a majestic amphitheater of mighty hills that seem as if marshaled here to see that the command to the mighty deep, "Hitherto shalt thou come and no further," is obeyed. The mighty rampart of Cape North, with its 3 bastions, for it is a triple headland, holds out its huge fist in defiance to its old enemy advancing in attack from the east and north and west. It seems as if nature, that oldest and most skillful of engineers, had designed this tremendous fortalice to resist an attack from every possible direction. The western spur of Cape North is called White Point, from the lightish color of the cliff, we imagine, and a grand sight it is, sloping to the depths of ocean from a height of 1,500 feet. This point is quite close to the level ground at Bay St. Lawrence, not a mile distant, but you cannot get to it by land, as the shore is almost a sheer precipice. You can, however, distantly admire it, and we hope you will before you have ceased your earthly pilgrimage. For positively you must come to Cape North. It is not very difficult, in a way, for there is a passably developed path, yes, really across the promontory, leading to the lighthouse, which is built about a mile inside the southern spur of the Cape, which is called Money Point. Well, you leave Bay St. Lawrence, traversing at first some level green fields, and make for the foot of this path. The mountain towers overhead more and more menacingly as you approach. The path is unobstructed, however, but very steep and encumbered in places with loose stones. All you need here is, as the Scotch say, a stout heart to a stay brae. So you give a final look upwards. You know the hill would be laughing in its sleeve if it had one. You stiffen your lower extremities, and up you begin to go. If you happen to have a weak heart or short breath, you will sit down after you got about 200 feet up, and reflect what a humbug this world is. But in turning round, you have caught a grand view of Bay St. Lawrence, with Black Point and Cape St. Lawrence opposite, and this diverts your attention. Being thus rested, you face the steep again. This is worse than the Sugarloaf climb in one way. It is so monotonous as your feet slide back among these loose stones. But don't give it up. You will be repaid before coming back. Well, up at last you sit down again and smile in an inane sort of way, and then try whether you can laugh or not. And presently you are looking down that hill in a mood of mingled malice and triumph, and laughing as heartily as ever you did in your life. Now cross a level space for about 4 miles, over a rich, dark loam, covered with a vegetation almost tropical in its luxuriance. We wonder if these plateaux will ever be cultivated, and you come to the brow of the height overlooking the Atlantic. Here is one of the grandest sights in Cape Breton. From a height of 1,000 feet or so, you are looking seaward through a gorge between 2 mountains upon a vast extent of ocean. The size of this stupendous gorge, which cuts sheer down nearly to the water's edge, incline at a sharp angle towards each other, and are covered with a dense mass of the greenest vegetation, contrasting in gorgeous relief with the intense blue of the limitless ocean and the milder hues of the overarching sky. Do you think you can paint? Have you cunning and craft with brush and color? Have you a soul to which the mighty soul of things will whisper its secrets, and you would like to tell what it says, and cannot? If you cannot express it in words, come here and try to put it into form and color, and impress the soul of it in with the varnish. If Turner had ever been in Cape Breton, he would be alive still, that is, in the landscapes he would have painted. But come and see it and bring your easel and brushes and colors, and take care you do not tumble down the hill in the excess of your admiration. Now you must get down to the lighthouse. Perhaps you think it is not hard work to climb down a mountain. Just try to climb down the roof of a barn 1,000 feet high for practice, and you will see. If it were not for the merciful friction which the ground presents, you could not get down at all unless you slid down and shot 30 fathoms deep into the water. But you will get down in time if you stop once in a while to rest and exchange condolences with your companion or companions, as the case may be. The sea is getting nearer and nearer, and presently you turn off towards the lighthouse, which soon makes its appearance. At the same time you see St. Paul's Island in the distance, looking high, narrow, hazy, and uncertain, as if it had just come to have a look at the country, and were undecided whether to stay or no. It is 12 miles distant, and the day is somewhat hazy. Leaving the hospitable lightkeeper, you go out towards Money Point, from which the hill of the Cape is to be seen. Along here there is a level green space between the sea and the mountain, extending round Money Point, and then abruptly terminating, so that Cape North is practically inaccessible by land, and we had not time to go round in a boat. No doubt you could get to it by forcing your way through the thick vegetation of the plateau, and then clambering down the face of the steep. But we had not the time for that either, and perhaps not the inclination. At all events, we saw it at a distance of 1/4 of a mile. In outline, it presents the appearance of a convex joined to the concave arc of a circle before it disappears beneath the ocean. Its southern side is almost a sheer rocky precipice, known as the Shag Rock, where seabirds have their nests in great numbers, and whose restless flight and hoarse multifarious screaming add to the loneliness and desolation of the scene. Just where we are standing, it is said, a French ship was cast away on her way home after the surrender of Quebec, and all hands lost. Some people of quality were among the passengers. We were told that many coins have been gotten here at different times, but we imagine they have all been found by this time. A good deal of ingenuity is said to have been exercised in fishing them up. A long pole was daubed at the end with pitch, and, when the water was very clear, they were pulled up in this adhering style. Hence the place is called Money Point. We take a long last look at Cape North and say goodbye to it. Perhaps we shall never see it again. No matter, we have seen it once, and it is worth seeing and remembering too. Man and ocean shall soon cease their fretting. What shall come out of the vast, eternal silence? Shall we only then gather speech, or shall we be dumb forever? This, of course, is only one of the jaunts you can take in Cape Breton in order to view the scenery and to breathe its health-giving air. It is the hardest journey and the longest, but perhaps it is the best for all that. If you want to see the Bredor Lake, there are steamers plying about to different points of interest from which you can easily sail or drive to the most picturesque and attractive localities. You can spend a month on Bredor Lake and not see it all or tire of it. You have land and water, hill and dale, in ever new and interesting variety. If you are an adventurous boatman, you may gratify your taste ad libitum. There is no better place in the world for yachting than the Bredor Lake. It is sometimes windy enough, but no doubt you will not object to that. There are Great and Little Bredor, and Bedeck, and the Grand Narrows, and St. Peter's, and Waikagama, and East Bay and West Bay, all competing with one another in interest and beauty. It would take you weeks to explore them all, and many a splendid sail you would have. Or you could get off the train at Orangedale or River Dennis and drive out to Mabou, down through Margaree and Waikagama, and be equally delighted with the scenery. You will find many things in Cape Breton new, to you, and old, things traditional and antique and unique as well, but that will make it all the more entertaining. If you take an interest in human nature, and who does not, you will find phases of it here that you never encountered before and cannot encounter anywhere else in the world, and it will do you good. Or from Sydney, you can drive 25 miles down to Louisbourg and smell gunpowder in imagination or the healthful Atlantic breeze in reality. We believe the only thing that is the matter with Cape Breton is that it has not been developed as a country for tourists. We fail to see how they can help coming when they once know of it and when the facilities for travel are provided, as it is to be hoped they before long will be. Recreation, rest, recuperation is, in these days of wear and tear and hurry, a necessity, a business. And the providing for it in all sensible and legitimate and energetic ways ought also to be made a business. But this has scarcely yet begun in Cape Breton. We have been too far out of the world's track, and for that very reason people should want to come here to enjoy rest and quiet and to breathe a healthful and invigorating air. The central and northern parts of the island are free from the fogs and vapors of the Atlantic, and that is an advantage in itself. The legacy left by the Gulf Stream to the southern shores of New England and the provinces is not a good thing for invalids or weakly people. The air coming off the Gulf of St. Lawrence, in midsummer at all events, is much more bracing and invigorating. If the CPR should assume control of the Cape Breton Railway, no doubt the facilities for travel will be at once and materially increased. The Strait of Canso will be bridged, and communication with the island will be much more rapid and convenient, and the people of New England and the upper provinces will not imagine they are going to the end of the world when they come to Cape Breton. Should the claims of Louisbourg as the rapid transit port of the Dominion be recognized and made practical, a new era of prosperity would at once dawn upon the whole island. The coal trade is at present in an unsatisfactory condition. Our exports of this article up the St. Lawrence are met and successfully resisted by imports from the American frontier. Anthracite coal is imported free of duty, and consequently our coal, owing to this fact and the low rate charged upon other American coal, receives but a partial protection after all. These facts indicate that we have not sufficient political, that is, financial interest, to ensure that our coal be adequately protected. We have to put up with half measures, which are no measures. This is only one phase of the unsatisfactory trade relations subsisting between this country and the United States. The cheap transportation of coal is only beginning to be developed. What possibilities are in it, no one as yet knows. Had we reciprocity, or its equivalent, an equal tariff, in coal, we might be able to place coal in the American market at a cheaper rate than the Americans can produce it. Should this be among the possibilities of the future, Louisbourg would be made a point of export for coal all the year round. A railway was built some years ago connecting Louisbourg with one of the mines, but it has lapsed into disuse owing to the fact that there is little or no coal trade with the United States. But the claims of Louisbourg as a natural terminus for a railway are being revived in more than one direction, and it is more than probable that before many years that place will have recovered some of its ancient importance. Communication with Cape Breton is yet difficult and mysterious for the average tourist. Pleasure-seeking, recreation, is yearly becoming more and more a business, and a necessary business. So many people and so many localities are catering to the public in this regard that a resort for tourists stands no chance in the keen competition which exists unless its advantages are made known to the public, and communication with it be made rapid and convenient, and unless also suitable accommodation be provided. There is no question but Cape Breton stands unrivaled in this part of America as a summer resort. The hand of nature has been lavish in its endowment, and it only remains that this shall be seconded by artificial development to ensure a steadily increasing movement of tourists to its shores in the summer months. We have had more visitors among us this season than ever before, and these are, no doubt, but the advance guard of greater numbers who will soon follow, provided fitting arrangements be made for their accommodation. A tent for a house and Frainie's chimney for the establishment of a cuisine will not suit all the world. We do not wish to see that mountain transformed into an incipient volcano, or to see Cape Breton dotted with the tents of a migrating army. Doubtless a good deal of money will be needed to fit Cape Breton in proper style for the reception of all who will want to come. But time will bring its own developments, and, as in every other department, the demand will create the supply. We have thus attempted to set forth the importance and advantage of Cape Breton in a historic, picturesque, and commercial sense. We should like to see the claims of this island recognized in the public policy of the country and in that of the Canadian Pacific Railway, and in the appropriation and expenditure of public monies. We believe that Cape Breton may be of as much consequence to modern commercial Canada as it was to ancient military Canada. The nearest accessible point to Europe, it juts out like a huge coal wharf into the Atlantic, and in these days of steam communication, no more need be said.